Hi folks, welcome back to the Hoard. Well, guess what? You guys fixed my Cushman for me. The battery's all charged there. I got like cloudy skies out there. That one says 43 degrees. I don't know, could you guys see that? Yeah. And this one says it's almost 1 o'clock, 12:30-ish. So it's the 2nd of December, Tuesday, 2.2 degrees Celsius. This one in a cold spot says 36 degrees Fahrenheit. I hope you guys could see that. Anyway, welcome to Tuesday. So, a couple of you guys wrote in that maybe it's a bad capacitor. You know, the capacitor that goes with the points. And it turns out that's what the problem was. But just quickly, I was kind of suspicious because I'm watching the points and the points are sparking like no tomorrow. And the way this circuit is supposed to work is that capacitor is actually supposed to partially balance out the inductance from the coils so that when the points close, there is not such a harsh spark. So I was a little bit suspicious of that. I was also a tad suspicious because the points, given that they're new points, have really, I don't think they have 2 hours on them, were beginning to get, you know, a little burnt. And I had set them to the proper distance when I put them in. And still, the way they were kind of arcing and all, I was suspicious. So it turns out, as you can see, this one was brandy spanking new, and it turns out it was no good. There is a quick way of testing it. You put your meter up at, you know, the maximum mega ohm range for measuring resistance, and you kind of put it on the thing and you could watch it count up, or you flip it side to side and once again you could watch it counting until you get back to like open circuit, which means that you basically use the battery in your meter to charge the capacitor up. So there we are. Let me show you guys what I got now. Yeah, she's a touch cold. Turning on the gas is always good, too. You don't see the sparks. Right, remember that was the whole blue light show? And the other thing is, I'm not sure you're going to be able to see it on these. But when I gun it up, these things just get brighter and brighter. So, looks like it's fixed. Now that it's fixed, I have a couple of other decisions to make about this kind of carb. The what is that? Makuto copies, Makuto clones. Though I tolerate them where I have to tolerate them, I don't particularly like them. I really don't. I'd rather put a Honda 200 S carb on it, or I'd rather go back to the old-fashioned Kevin To go back to the old-fashioned Kevin, I'm gonna have to, put it in some carb dip and give it a proper rebuild. It's still not quite kosher. Well, I had this thing apart when I first started it up and figured out what was wrong with it was the capacitor. I also went through the trouble of spraying all the joints on the intake manifold, and God knows there's enough of them, right? You got this one and this one, that one, right? Those two, plus down on the two heads, right? So there's a million, there's a million places for a vacuum leak. And the way I do that is, once I get it running, I just spray it with a little starting fluid or brake clean, something with some volatiles in it, and the engine will change tone as it gets sucked in the vacuum leak. I did that too, just to make sure I didn't have anything else going on. I mean, this thing had quite a bit wrong with it. I had an open wire. I had plugs that were a little shaky. I cleaned them up. The points, I'm saying they were open too far. Maybe they were open to touch too far. I'm also thinking that they might have had an issue with with that bad cap, that they were arcing all the hell. I borrowed the capacitor from the bike out over there. If you go through that door and go straight, you almost run into it. So this thing is fixed. Finally, it's fixed. And I was talking about the Kevin carb. To put the Kevin carb back on it, I do have to rig up some kind of air cleaner assembly. That sock I have lashed over the end of the carburetor really is not the right way to do it. Right? I mean, at some point, if something happens to the sock and it's ingesting dirt, and I destroy an engine, that's not all that smart. Or if it ingests the sock, it probably wouldn't kill it, but I can't imagine feeding socks to two-cylinder engines is like good for them. So if I do keep that carb, I have to come up with first of all, I have to rebuild it, and I have to come up with a proper air cleaner assembly. If I keep this carb on it, the pluses are it's no longer governed, and I discovered that as you give it fuel here, as I give it fuel here, if I'm pulling on this rod, it actually starts to pull back. So it does have a centrifugal governor on the engine, which is nice. But if I keep this carb, I get rid of the governor. A good thing is it gives me more power, and I get to determine when I'm going to use the power. The bad thing is, if I let some other moron drive it and they put the pedal to the floor and hold it there without shifting or whatever, they can launch my motor to heaven, right? They can blow my motor up. So I got that to think about. My lean normally is to try to keep these things as intact as possible. Not that this is like a collector's item, right? I mean, just look at it. I mean, it's the rat of rats. But I normally try to keep them as close to OEM as possible, because in the future I can always hack that carburetor on there. But if I get rid of the OEM carburetor, I can't go back and get another OEM carburetor. For beat to death shells of carburetors on eBay, I mean stuff without throttle linkages, right, missing the throttle shaft because it broke somehow, with stuff like that in unknown condition, except for broken throttle shafts and some other major things wrong with them, they're trying to get $60 plus shipping. So you got almost $100 tied up in a carb that you might not even be able to rebuild and might not be able to do anything with. So I guess my belief is, in the future, if I cop an idea and say, oh, I'm going to put a Makuno on this thing, right, I can always get a Makuno carb, right? and slam it on here. So my lean is to go back to the Kevin carb, which gives me back to the governor and gives everything else working. But before I could do that, I need to find my carburetor dip and dip the carb and get that thing, get it straightened out properly. So the good news is I got this thing, or we got this thing running. Thanks for the input. There were 2 or 3 guys who mentioned the capacitor, so I appreciate. I don't recall your names offhand. One of them, I just read the comment this morning, and I said, it's not that big a deal to go and get a cap off that rig out back and slam it in there and see what happens. Anyway, this is all very, very good news, right? There's no use in having a object that doesn't run. The other nice thing about going through all this, I learned a lot about it. Most of the time you can't watch the points open and close because there's a distributor cap on top, right? You got a rotor that's picking which cylinder is firing, right? You normally don't have this 2-coil system or coil pack system. You know, most of the time nowadays they use electronics to fire this stuff. So normally, or once again, or for the older stuff, normally it's more than 2 cylinders and you got a cap on top which is picking your cylinder. So you can't watch them, but I learned that if your points are flashing like no tomorrow, you might want to wonder what kind of shape your capacitor's in. It's not that hard to test a capacitor. You just go forward and backwards with a meter and watch it count. So that's not all that hard to do. I guess to some extent I should even be a little suspicious of the cap because I changed the points and cap in this thing once already, and that could do it. The other thing is this thing didn't have that drop resistor in it. I'm wondering if that didn't also put a little extra wear and tear on the cap. Right now that the drop resistor's in there, it won't beat up on it so bad. Yeah, I'm happy with it now. It's running well enough where I can just hook the wires up, put that on there, turn the idle up a little bit, kind of use it like a garden tractor, and use the gears to bump it around. The governor's not hooked up, so if I load it too much, it will stall. So, but it's enough. It's enough where I can move it around. I can do something with it. It's not stuck here, except when it snows. Right, then it's quite stuck here. This week, I have to. Supposedly, I was going to be off, but it was going to rain. It's supposed to rain tomorrow, so I think I might go in for one night this week. My wife is talking about going to see my son next week sometime. So I don't know. My schedule's a little flaky. The other thing I truly got to do. This snow should be gone, and we're supposed to get some rain. But when it comes to moving things around, especially with the backhoe loader, if the ground is frozen, I have no problem. You know, I got those Aggie tires on there, and they have a tendency to really beat up on soft ground. So if the ground is frozen, I'm good. I can move stuff. If it's dry, the ground is dry, I can move stuff. But in the in-between, where the ground is kind of like this, quite honestly, my tractor will make a pretty big mess. I also need to figure out where I could pop another few objects. There's another couple of bikes that before the winter really sets in, I would like to get them put away a little better. Yeah, guys, I am very happy with the way this came out and with the way it made it through the last storm, even though this is very thin. With snow, it tends not to leak in. The snow has a tendency to fall off, and the stuff in there dries. With rain, that has a tendency to come in. I'm very happy with the way this building worked out in the back. Even with the load of wet snow, I was a little concerned about the wet snow getting pinned up against the house and perhaps working its way under the shingles. But it turns out that when the sun beats on it and there's a little bit of space between the building and so forth, it melts off very quickly and drops down. So I'm not going to have that trouble. You'll see like a piece of bare roof right along the side of the shed fairly quickly, between the house and the shed fairly quickly. Because of the bad weather and all, unfortunately we didn't get to play with these like I would have liked to with my son right for the holiday. The being without power, not that it's like the world is ending, but it's work, quite honestly, to every day when you wake up, before you can take a shower, you got to fire up the shed. Yeah, this one's gone. Or fire up the generator and gas them up, check the oil, fire them up, run them. First I got to power up the furnace to the point where it's loaded with hot water for me. Once again, not hard, but just when you got to be up early, right? You got to be up doing this. You can't be napping. You can't be socializing. You're busy. You're working on getting the house warm and getting everything set up. I'm just taking a quick walk around to see if everything's holding up as it should be. Came through the storm well. I bought gasoline before the storm, mostly to replace some of the gas that had been floating around that I was concerned about not being stabilized, and I didn't, I just went through that whole contamination annoyance. So I had bought gas, I had bought stable in it, and it made it a lot easier to have the gas ready to go into the generators. Would have been another annoyance if I was poking around looking for gas. The good thing is, at this point, the China one, the yellow one, has nice fresh gas in it, so it's all happy, all stabilized gas. More or less ran a tank through it, ran some what do you guys call that stuff? It's in a seafoam. Ran some seafoam through it, ran some seafoam through the Generac, though it could use a little more. So those generators are nice and happy. The China one could use an oil change. I guess that's about all I have to tell you. Thanks for watching, guys. Thanks for commenting. Thanks for subscribing. Thanks for the input that actually helped me fix this Cushman. A lot of good input. And I feel pretty good that it's got the right coils in it. It's got the right resistor in it. I also moved a bunch of marginal things with this cart back to the way things really should be. Okay, folks, take care. Remember to keep your feet down, keep your head up, live, love, and have a great time. And thanks for watching, commenting, and subscribing, as always. And remember to enjoy your days, each and every one of them. You don't know how many you're going to get, so make sure you enjoy what you do get. Take care now, folks. Bye.